Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. Took the week off from posting videos, just kind of a chaotic week last week, so apologize for that. Took my nephew to Game 4 of the ECF in Indianapolis, Knicks versus Pacers. Won't ever apologize for that. He came and hung out for a couple of days following, so just kind of a chaotic week. Then I had to catch up on work. So didn't post any videos, but we're back this week. Normal schedule, at least 2 videos, maybe more than that. Something that I've been kind of sitting on for a little over a week. I was just kind of flirting around other videos on YouTube, seeing what other fan bases are talking about with their teams. And, like Jacksonville in particular is bringing in Liam Cohen, a new head coach. And the question in Jacksonville is, is Trevor Lawrence the guy? He's had a few years in the NFL. We haven't really seen him take too many extraordinary leaps into superstardom. You're talking about a former number 1 overall pick, and a lot of the content I saw, at least when I was exploring that avenue, was like, hey, is Trevor Lawrence going to be the guy? Is he going to be a franchise quarterback that can elevate, that can take Jacksonville to some sort of relevance? Will Liam Cohen help that? Doug Peterson, many think, is a really good offensive mind, and he couldn't quite get the best out of Lawrence. So, that's a question that's being floated around, and, you bounce around other teams, and Dallas with Dak Prescott, that's like an evergreen topic with Dak every offseason. It's like, is Dak ever going to be good enough? Is he ever going to be able to have the pieces around him and flourish himself to help take Dallas to the promised land? And it's, a topic for teams that, they say if you don't have a quarterback, you don't really have a shot in the NFL. It's that important of a position to hit home. And while I want to believe Jordan Love is that guy and can be that guy for Green Bay, this video is not intended to be questioning that necessarily, but more so how in an offseason where, if you look at how the season ended for the Packers and why it ended abruptly in the playoffs against Philadelphia, and part of that is just Philadelphia being a powerhouse, and they end up winning the Super Bowl, and they club Kansas City upside the head in New Orleans in February. But for Green Bay, if you date it back even to the regular season finale against Chicago, and down the stretch in particular in the last month or two of the season, the passing game really regressed. And how I wanted to sort of shape this video was wondering why that hasn't been brought up more in Packers social circles, social channels, outlets, social media, content creators. I haven't seen it a lot this offseason, and I'm wondering, here's my question. Did the Jaire Alexander situation, dilemma, saga, however you want to label it, and it's still ongoing. We still don't have a resolution. At the time of me recording this video, we still don't know if Jaire Alexander is going to be in Green Bay or somewhere else in 2025. Did that situation in a way benefit Jordan Love discourse, dialogue, topics having taken place on social media outlets by Packers content creators and others this offseason? Because if you remember 2 years ago, Green Bay's season ends divisional round in San Francisco, heartbreaking fashion. Looked like the Packers were the better team. They led that game late. Carlson misses a field goal to put them up 7. San Francisco goes right down the field and scores. Love can't answer. Love in the offense can't answer late in the final minute, and Green Bay loses. But the week prior to that, Jordan Love absolutely carved up the Dallas Cowboys defense. Wild card weekend in Jerry World. The Packers not only beat the Cowboys, this is 2 years ago, they throttled Dallas. They curb stomped them. Again, however way you want to describe it, whatever descriptors you want to use, it was a blowout. And in large part, Savage had a nice pick 6, but Jordan Love in the passing game sliced and diced the Dallas secondary all game. And even though the season came to a heartbreaking end in Santa Clara against the 49ers, you exit that season thinking, man, this passing game is really going to take off in 2024. Look at how the season ended. And, even 2 years ago going into the playoffs, Jordan Love carved up Minnesota's defense in one of those last games at U.S. Bank Stadium, a Brian Flores-led defense. And so there was so much optimism swirling 2 years ago, entering last year about the passing game. And it took a step back. There's no doubting that. I know, I'm not going to use the word regressed, but I'm going to say the passing game wasn't nearly as efficient. It wasn't It didn't have a rhythm. There wasn't momentum, especially finishing the year throughout the year. And we can, dive off into different topics, and that's what we're going to do as to reasons as to why that may be. But again, I'm wondering if the Jaire Alexander situation helped alleviate some pressure that could have been put more on Jordan Love's shoulders entering this season. Because, again, I'm looking at other quarterbacks that are being questioned and whether or not they're the answer, whether or not they're a franchise quarterback. And most of us probably want to believe Jordan Love is, and we've seen signs of it. We've seen the indicators. But the step back that the passing game took in 2024, especially down the stretch, can't be ignored. And it does make you wonder, what are we going to see in 2025? There's multiple layers to this. I'll start with this. You can't ignore the injuries, and I'm not using it as a crutch, no pun intended, for Jordan Love, but to have to use the word plural, injuries, instead of injury, kind of details the year that was for Love in 2024. Week 1, Brazil, you start the season against who ended up winning the Super Bowl, Philadelphia Eagles. One of the last plays of the game, Jordan Love, MCL sprain. Misses the next 2 games against Indianapolis and Tennessee. Comes back for the game against Minnesota. I think that was week 4. It had to have been week 4. Against the Vikings. Didn't look 100% in that game against Minnesota, gave it a go. Then later on in the season in Jacksonville, groin injury. Leaves the game in the second half, doesn't return. Malik Willis closes out, the Packers win. Then week 18 against Chicago, where it was, hey, do you play the starters? Do you not play the starters? How much do you play the starters? Jordan Love, elbow injury, the funny bone, and leaves that game against Chicago, does not return. You're talking about MCL sprain with the knee, talking about a groin injury, talking about an elbow injury, 3 different junctures of the season, all things that Jordan Love had to try to overcome, hurdles to try to clear, not going to be easy. And there were times where he was playing games. That first matchup against Detroit, I think even at 100%, Detroit just looked better than the Packers. That was the game at Lambeau Field earlier in the season, but Jordan Love was not 100%. I still think Detroit wins that game, but Love didn't look like his normal self. And I am not using the injury dialogue as an excuse. It was based in truth, based in reality. You could see it with Jordan Love. I wonder how much the injuries, and as they piled up, how much that affected any sort of rhythm he was trying to get into in 2024. Because when you talk about the passing game taking a step back, some of it does start with the quarterback. Secondary to that, or a tertiary reason to that, the drops. And Matt LaFleur, I think it was last week, I guess it depends when you watch this video, Matt LaFleur, I'm going to read a couple of quotes per The Athletic. I think it was Matt Schneidman, Packers reporter. He was asked about specifically Jordan Love if he regressed. And again, I said I'm not going to use the word regression. I'm going to say they took a step back, the passing game as a whole. And LaFleur was asked last week about Jordan Love and if he saw regression in 2024. And LaFleur said, and I quote, "I think there's a narrative out there for whatever reason that he," meaning Love, "wasn't as productive as the year before. He missed significant time. He missed the better of 3 games. Really, it was Indy, it was Tennessee. He went out in Jacksonville, and then he went out in Chicago." All of that is very true. I just noted all that. LaFleur also brought up the drops. This is a quote from LaFleur. "So 3 games is a significant amount of time, and you're not going to produce as much from a numbers perspective. Also, let's be honest. We've talked about this. We did have a lot of drops last year, so there's other circumstances that play into it. I think all in all, everybody's going to be better, though." The drops weren't just like a minor problem. You're talking about having not 1 but 2 wide receivers in the top tier of the National Football League in drops. Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks both had 9, which was top 3, top 4 in the entire National Football League. The Packers, I believe, had the 2nd or 3rd most drops in the entire NFL. The drop rate was horrendous. Wicks was more alarming because he didn't have as many targets as a guy like Jaden Reed, but had just as many drops. He wasn't getting as many looks, but his drop numbers were still glaringly obvious. And so that plays a factor into it. Again, I'm not using these as excuses. I'm trying to figure out why the passing game regressed, A, and B, if it's just not being talked about enough entering 2025, be like, does everyone have an abundant amount of confidence? Maybe that's it. Maybe everyone's like, hey, 2024 was an anomaly. Love was banged up. There were a ton of drops. I didn't see, from a scheme standpoint, it didn't seem like guys were running as open as they had 2 years ago. That game against Dallas in the playoffs, I keep going back to it, but Dobbs was running free, Luke Musgrave was running free, Wicks, Green Bay just put a number on Dallas on the big stage, playoff game, Jordan Love's first playoff start, and he showed up and showed out. We didn't see it, especially in the last month or two of the regular season. There were a couple outliers. I thought the game in Seattle was all right. New Orleans was a mess. Green Bay made easy work of them. The passing game looked all right against the Saints. But then you're talking about just not looking as much of a polished product as we saw 2 years ago, yet it's not being brought up. At least I'm not seeing it that much this offseason entering 2025. And maybe it is just an internal belief and external from the fans that, hey, last year was a bit of an anomaly. They're going to figure it out. They're going to right the wrongs. Certainly drafting Matthew Golden in the first round, Savion Williams, who's more of a gadget player than a true wide receiver in the third round, will help. And maybe there's just a lot of belief that, hey, Jordan Love is going to be fine. He is going to be the guy. And that's completely fine. And maybe that's the case. I do tend to think the Jaire Alexander situation helped, as odd as that may sound, because you go back to January when the season ended in Philadelphia, and a couple days after that, players are cleaning out the lockers. There's some, exit interviews with the team taking place, but there's also press conferences, exit press conferences. The last time we hear from a lot of the guys at their lockers for a few months. And Jaire Alexander didn't even really talk to reporters. All he said was, I don't even know if I'm going to be here next year. And that was back in January. And that started the spiral of all these times we hear Goody speak at his end of the year presser, at the owners' meetings, at the combine, and being pretty blunt about it, saying hey, with Jaire, we can bring him back. We can keep him around. It wasn't a financial thing, but was very coy. It was coy yet obvious that the Packers weren't 100% in, far from it, from bringing back Jaire. And then you see all these reports the Packers are shopping Jaire. They're going to try to trade him. And at one point it was hey, it seemed like a trade was coming together, and it was based around the team that was going to acquire Jaire, wanting him to restructure his deal. That was a no-go. It still seemed well, could they release him before the draft, after the draft, June 1st, before, after? What makes the most sense? And now we're at a point where it's it seems there were reports, was it Schneidman or Jason Wilde? Someone reported that, it might have been Domofsky. Someone reported that the Packers have now brought to the table a restructured deal for Jaire to keep him in Green Bay for 2025. And it has chewed up, whether right or wrong, a ton of the spotlight, a ton of the storylines for Green Bay this offseason have circulated around the ongoing saga with Jaire Alexander in the Green Bay Packers. And it sounds like Jaire's smitten about defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. Now it sounds he'd like to stay in Green Bay, but at certain points in time in the offseason, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that he would be gone in one way or another, whether that was trade or just being flat out released. And I do think because of the caliber of player that Jaire is, when he's on the field, he is still to me, a top-tier cornerback in the NFL. The problem is he's missed 34 out of the last 68 regular season games. That's just not going to cut it, especially for the paycheck that they're cutting him to be available, to play. And last year there seemed to be some friction, some real genuine friction, although it was never directly stated. It seemed like the Packers and their training staff and their doctors thought Jaire was good to go at a couple different points in the season, but Jaire himself said, no, I'm not. And that might have been a breaking point, or at least seemed like one. I do believe this Jaire situation, because it started, if you want to say it started in the regular season when he started piling up more missed games, that's fair. But to me, it started really in January, right after the season ended in Philadelphia. A couple days after that, players are cleaning out their lockers, and he goes on the record and says, I don't even know if I'm going to be here next year. And that's that. That kind of got the wheels in motion to, how is this going to come to a conclusion? We still don't know. At the time of me recording this, again, we still don't know if Jaire is going to be in Green Bay, somewhere else, with a different helmet and a different jersey in 2025. I know there's a lot of internal belief in Jordan Love still. Josh Jacobs had said entering last year that he thought Jordan Love would be the next superstar quarterback. Those were his words. Thought Jordan Love would be the next superstar quarterback in the NFL. And I don't think anyone can make the case that Green Bay's passing offense was, star-spangled spectacular in 2024. You just can't make that case. But why did they take a step back? Was it the injuries? Was it the drops? Was it that they didn't have any wide receiver emerge as the true number one? It could be all of it blended together. Because of that, why wasn't it talked about more this offseason? I just, I consume a good amount of Packers content. I didn't see it discussed as much as I thought it would be. And, Dan Orlovsky of ESPN actually tweeted out a couple days ago, again, when I'm recording this, a couple days ago, I got to find the tweet because I don't want to, it was praising Jordan Love, and rightfully so. Again, I'm not sounding the alarms at all. I'm just wondering, why wasn't this talked about more? Because the passing game, when I went back and watched some of it, it stunk. It stunk up the joint. And some of it's going to be Jordan Love. Some of it's going to be LaFleur. Some of it's going to be the wide receivers. But why aren't we talking about it? I think the Jaire situation kind of benefited a lot of that Jordan Love dialogue from taking place this offseason. Yeah, so Orlovsky tweeted, anyone who says Jordan Love regressed last year doesn't look at quarterback play properly. Thanks, have an awesome day. Again, I didn't use the word regress, but the passing game as a whole took a step back. He's zoning in on Jordan Love and saying, if you said Jordan Love regressed, you're not watching. I'm saying, well, the passing game definitely took a step back. Why is that? Injuries, drops, scheme, all of it. Secondarily to that, why isn't it being talked about more? Again, maybe an abundant amount of confidence from the fan base, which is fine, and from those in the building that, hey, they're going to be fine. It was a one-off, and Jordan Love's going to be healthier in 2025. That's the hope. But I'm cruising around different outlets to see what other teams are talking about with their favorite teams. And in Jacksonville, it's like, whoa, what's going on with Trevor Lawrence? Is he the guy? Even in Houston, they're like, man, C.J. Stroud, rookie year to second year, you make the playoffs in both, but C.J. Stroud didn't look himself. And a lot of people are like, the offensive line was horrendous. You go back and watch the Texans, the offensive line was horrendous. That seemed like the issue, the main one, the main culprit for the Texans in their offense. And even with the Chargers, it's like they bring in Harbaugh and they're establishing an identity that's run first, but can Herbert make you the plays when you need them in a pinch in the passing game to get you over the top? Does he have the weapons to do that? I'm seeing a lot of Herbert content out there this offseason about, man, is he going to take that next step? Is he going to take that gigantic leap? Just didn't see it that much with the Packers, which is fine, but I just think it's fascinating that the reason why, at least to me, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, is because of how long the Jaire Alexander situation has gone on, the nature of the player he is, being a very, very crucial piece to the puzzle when he is on the field, and how the dilemma still doesn't have a resolution. Am I overly concerned about the passing game for Green Bay during 2025? I would say I'm curious to see how it unfolds. I think getting Matthew Golden, when you take a receiver in the first round, your goal is for that receiver to eventually be a number one, right? Like a true number one wide receiver. That's why you go and you take one in the first round. I am curious to see, if Jordan Love is healthy, because I do think that definitely factored in last year to the passing game as a whole going in the wrong direction a little bit. But I don't know how much it affected him. I just know that it did. But to what extent on a week in, week out basis, even a day in, day out basis with practice, I don't know. We don't know. If Jordan Love's healthy in 2025, I'm very, very, very curious to see, is there a big step forward again? Or is this going to be a team that says, Josh Jacobs, we brought you in. We didn't want you to be a bell cow to this extent, but we're going to give you 25 totes a game because we're just going to lean on the run. We're going to lean on the offensive line, the big boys up front. We bring in Aaron Banks. We shift Elton Jenkins over to center. We're going to lean on Josh Jacobs because maybe out of the gates the passing game does struggle a little bit. You got two awesome tests team-wise to start the year in Detroit and Washington. I'm excited to see this passing game. I'm excited to see what they worked on in the offseason to improve. I'm curious to see if Jordan Love does take that big step forward in 2025. Again, you had Jacobs saying he believed 2 years ago, entering last year, that Jordan Love would be the next superstar quarterback in the NFL. Again, I just thought it was fascinating that I haven't seen it discussed too much, and I think a lot of that is, there is no shortage of Jaire Alexander discourse being had this offseason. And hell, I hope Jaire stays with the Packers in 2025. I think that cornerback room looks a hell of a lot different with Keyshawn Nixon or Nate Hobbs as your number one corner compared to those two being your 2 and 3 with Jaire as your top dog in the room. So we'll see. Hopeful that things will be on a better track for the passing game in 2025. Let me know what you guys think. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Always, always, always appreciative of all the support. We'll see you next time.